I'm Ashley. This is my girl Harlow, and today we are here to talk about how to go to occupational therapy school. How do you get in? What do you do? It's actually quite a long process for most people. So to start out, occupational therapy is a rehabilitation discipline where we focus on helping people do all of the activities of their lives that are meaningful to them with the most independence possible. That can range from things as basic as being able to use the bathroom, being able to sit up in bed, or things as complex as driving or doing school, being in relationships with people, everything in our lives. And that's one of the reasons why occupational therapy is so exciting. So there are a couple of routes you can take into the field of occupational therapy. You can become an OTR, which is an occupational therapist registered, or you can become an occupational therapy assistant. Occupational therapy assistants are at an AA degree level, and because I'm not in that type of program, I'm not going to talk about it as much, but it's another option if you don't want to go to graduate school. To be an occupational therapist registered, you have to go through either a master's program. Some of the programs are just like Masters of Occupational Therapy. Some of them are Master of Science in Occupational Therapy. Some of them are Master of Arts in Occupational Therapy. So there's a lot of diversity. My program is a clinical doctorate, which is becoming more and more common now. So both the master's and the doctorate are absolutely okay ways to enter the field, and it's being debated whether the doctorate will become the only entry-level degree or if they'll stick with the master's, and that hasn't been decided yet. So the first thing you need to do if you think you want to go to occupational therapy school is make sure that you know what OT is and why you want to do it. You can do that by observing occupational therapists, doing research on the internet, watching videos, working in other disciplines that are related. Just pretty much gaining experience working with people is a great place to start. On top of that, you're going to need a bachelor's degree. I earned a Bachelor of Science in Health Sciences from a state school in California. And I'm really glad that I took that particular degree path because I feel that I have a really good understanding of healthcare as a broad field instead of just occupational therapy. And I think that helps me a lot because it's hard to work effectively within a system when you only understand one small part of it. So having this greater working knowledge is really beneficial to me. A lot of people also study kinesiology, people study psychology, sociology. There's a creative writing major in my cohort, so really you can study anything. It just depends on what you want to get out of your undergraduate experience. Just as long as you take all the prerequisite classes that the programs you want to apply to require. So some of the biggest ones that you need to take for pretty much any school are anatomy and physiology, basic psychology, abnormal psychology, developmental psychology, usually bio. A few schools require like chemistry and physics. I didn't want to take either of those classes and I didn't apply to any schools that required them. Just make sure that wherever you're applying, you look at their specific prerequisites because not all programs want the same things, and some programs have really random requirements like a 3D arts class or something like that you need to make sure you take, or a neuroscience requirement. So it's really important to know before you apply. Doing well in your prerequisites is one of the most important academic things, at least it felt like from my perspective, because I had a pretty low overall GPA. I was like a smidge under 3.5. But my grades in my prerequisite classes were mostly A's, and then I had a B in A&P1 and I had a B plus in A&P2. So even though my cumulative GPA was pretty low, I worked really hard in my prerequisite classes that I took, and that ended up helping me get into school, along with a lot of other things. Doing well in anatomy and physiology is really important, not just for your application, but when you enter OT school. If you don't have a good working knowledge of muscles, bones, movement, it's going to be a lot harder to start out gross anatomy in grad school. So just a note for all those folks who are learning material and regurgitating it on tests and not remembering any of it, that might come back to bite you, even if you get an A in the class. Yeah, we talked a little bit about this, but I want to say all schools, but I don't know if there are any schools out there that don't require observation experiences. Some schools have hour requirements, like you need 20 hours of observation or 100 hours of observation. I worked as a rehabilitation tech, and I also worked as a behavior therapist, and in that job I co-treated with occupational therapists sometimes. So through both of those jobs, I got a lot of observation hours by working with OTs, and that was probably the strongest part of my applications, being that I wasn't as academically strong as a lot of the applicant pool. And I think that also is really helping me in school, because when we learn about clinical concepts, I can think back to examples I saw in my work, and that helps me understand things better. So I think when I applied, I ultimately had about 1,500 hours of observation, and then all my other work and volunteer experience that's separate was on top of that. And then depending on the program you're applying to, so occupational therapy is a very client-centered field, and in response to that, most programs view their applicants as whole people. So the application process often isn't all numbers based, even though, doing well academically is really important. My personal statement was also a really important part of my application. I talked about my experiences working with folks with developmental disabilities. Ever since I was a kid, I've done that. And also some personal experiences I had during undergrad that led me to the field of OT. And taking the time to learn about myself and learn how to talk about myself and be able to express how those experiences turned me into the person and clinician I hope to be in the future was really beneficial, both in my personal statement and in my interviews. All right, so you get your bachelor's degree, you take your prerequisite classes, you live your life and get some experience, and you do some observation. Unless I'm forgetting anything, the GRE, the school I ended up going to did not require the GRE, but I did apply to a few schools that do require it. I'm a horrible test taker, so I honestly didn't put that much effort into doing well on the GRE. I got pretty much the cutoff bare minimum score to apply to a few schools. Yeah, some people focus more on it. I really wasn't worried about it. I took it once. I didn't want to take it again. It's expensive, it's annoying, it has nothing to do with OT, yada, yada, yada. So you'll submit your application with all of those components, and then hopefully the next step is that you'll be offered some interviews. I went to 2 interviews. They were both very different. The first interview I went to, we had a big group session where they basically talked to us about the program, and then we broke into groups, and you either went to your interview, you learned about financial aid, or you went on a tour of the campus. And that program had a group interview. We went around the table, there was about 5 of us in the room and 2 faculty members, and we took turns answering questions, and then we did a group activity where we had to solve a clinical problem together. I really enjoyed that opportunity. I ended up getting waitlisted at that school for a little while and then accepted. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think my GRE score and low cumulative GPA probably played into me getting waitlisted there. But I ended up choosing the school I actually go to instead. And I'm very happy about that. Yeah, the second interview I went to, it was a similar thing where they split you up into groups and you go around and do different things at different times. We had a talk where our program director talked to us about the program. We had a panel where we could ask questions of current students. We had a group activity that was just like an icebreaker, I think, to fill time. And we had 30-minute individual interviews that I was really surprised they took that much time to talk to us, and really grateful for it. So for the interview portion, I walked into a room and there's 2 alumni of the program. Most people interviewed with a faculty member, but I just interviewed with 2 alumni. My file was sitting on their table in between us, and I could tell that they had access to all my information. And I was surprised to find out that they had actually read my personal statement, read all the information about me, and started asking me like questions like they knew me right away. That was really pleasantly surprising. It was really exciting because I got to talk to people who are in a position I hope to be in soon about why I'm so passionate about this and why I know that going to this particular school was the right move for me. Yeah, and then I finished my interview, the day was over, met up with my husband and our family and celebrated. And that was pretty much the end of my application process. I got a call a week later that I was accepted, which was awesome. And I immediately put my deposit down and said no to the other school, and now I'm just finishing my first semester. So some key things to take away, initial thoughts about the application process, are to make sure that you know how to articulate exactly why you want to be an occupational therapist, as opposed to any other helping profession or healthcare field. Why do you want to be an OT and not a nurse? Why do you want to be an OT and not a PT? Why do you want to be an OT and not a social worker? And then also in terms of the interview process, you should be able to tell an interviewer or an admissions person, why do you want to go to that specific school? And why is it important for you to go there and not any other program? And also, why are you pursuing the specific degree that you're trying to get at that school? Why is it important for you to get the clinical doctorate instead of the master's? And those are all questions that surprisingly I didn't think a lot about before I started the application process, but by the end I had a really firm grasp of. Yeah, so make sure you think about that. Yeah, I would say my biggest tip to anyone who is at the beginning of the process is to try to work with or observe occupational therapists as much as you absolutely can, and also get experience in other fields to rule out wanting to do those. When I started undergrad, I thought I wanted to be an education specialist, and I started that degree program and quickly learned that it was not for me. And I'm grateful for that, because I would have sucked if I went through the entire degree program and then started working as a special education teacher and then realized I didn't want to do it. So yeah, try different things. Don't just try the first thing that you think you want to do. And if you really want to be an OT, you'll come back to that and you'll realize that. So, yeah, I'm hoping to do a few more videos. So this one obviously is all about the application process. I'd love to do a video on what my first semester was like, if anyone's interested in that, and on specific classes and topics. Yeah. So if you like this video, subscribe to our channel and leave a comment with what other occupational therapy school topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Thanks, bye. Say bye, Harlow. She did. She did.